George and Jimmy and I were doing a photo layout for a teenage magazine in the third season, and somebody came up and said, "Have you heard? Your guys have been switched from Mondays at 8 o'clock to Fridays at 10. And I heard that and I said, oh, that's the end of Chekov. Because Chekov was there for the pre-adolescent crowd. 8 p.m. on Monday was a good time for him. 10 p.m., either the kids are in bed or they're out on dates or something. They're not going to be home watching. There was this sense that we're going to go through the motions, finish the year, and that will be the end of Star Trek. In 1973, Star Trek was still trying to determine what kind of reincarnation it might have. It did come back as a Star Trek animated television series. That was one of the most painful moments, embarrassing moments of my entire life. Because I was at a convention in LA. Dorothy Fontana was giving a talk, and evidently she announced Star Trek was coming back as an animated series. Their talk finished, the doors opened, people came bursting out. I was standing there, and somebody says to me, and a crowd formed immediately, "How do you feel about Chekov not being in the animated series?" I had not known that. I knew that we were coming back. I didn't know that Chekov was not going to be in it. And I just stood there, just devastated. I felt betrayed that nobody had told me this, and felt rather insignificant. You know, I'd been with this series. We had gotten along well. I had achieved a niche with fans, and suddenly everybody in the world knows that there's a new Star Trek animated series, but Chekov isn't in it. So it was just awful. And when I mentioned it to Gene later that day, he brushed me off. There was no conversation about it. When Star Trek went off the air, I had nothing. I had a little baby at home. I had no work. The phone didn't ring. Star Trek had been an interval between unemployment, because I'd stopped getting work around 1966, early 67, and then Star Trek came along after Star Trek went off the air. I went back to not getting any work. So I was writing, and I wrote a screenplay, and I was a terrible typist. I still am. And we were typing in those days. And I paid Susan Sackett, Gene Roddenberry's secretary, to type it up for me. Somehow, I don't recall how this happened, he read it. He thought it was good, but of course, he said it needed work. He'd said that to every writer that ever worked for him, that it always needed work. So he knew that I had written. I think it was Dorothy Fontana who suggested that I write for the show, since I wasn't going to be in it. And she got in touch with me and asked me if I'd be interested. And I thought it'd be an interesting challenge. It ceased being interesting after the 5th or 6th draft. I didn't know Gene's history, that he had the writers write and rewrite and rewrite. I thought this was an indictment of me and my ability. I literally did 5 or 6 drafts, and then I said, I'm done. I saw it, and I don't recall it being any different from what I wrote. But yeah, it came through Dorothy. And then I found out, which is really remarkable to me, I thought she was a very talented writer. I read this beautiful book on the animation, and there was a quote from her. Infinite Welcome, I thought, was the best episode we did, which was amazing. I never knew anybody felt that way. And that it was Dorothy was really, really very touching, and I was very flattered.